Tonight, we begin with a development that Washington insiders had feared, dismissed, and quietly prepared for all at once. A revelation that unfolded not over months of investigation, but in a matter of hours. Hours that have left senior officials scrambling for answers. Hours that have exposed fault lines within the highest levels of American government. Hours that may very well reshape the political landscape for years to come. What leaked today crossed a line that White House officials had hoped would hold, the line between internal dysfunction and public exposure. And when that line broke, Capitol Hill did not hesitate. They responded with urgency, with outrage, and with a demand for immediate answers. We have obtained copies of these memos. We have verified their authenticity through multiple independent sources. And tonight we are going to walk you through every single word, every single implication, and every single consequence that is now unfolding in real time. What you are about to hear is not speculation. It is not interpretation. It is the documented reality of what has been happening behind closed doors at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And it is unlike anything we have seen in modern American political history. For months now, there had been signals, not official statements, not formal briefings, just signals that something deeply unusual was happening inside this White House. The administration has been controversial, yes, but they have been consistent in their controversy. Their moves have followed a certain logic, predictability, almost a pattern that observers could track and anticipate. But what set off alarm bells in Washington over the past several weeks was that the pattern went silent. Senior officials who monitor White House operations know the indicators: the sudden cancellation of routine briefings, the unexplained reshuffling of access credentials, the quiet dismissal of longtime staffers without public explanation, the sudden increase in encrypted communications between departments. All of that went quiet. And whenever a White House goes quiet in that particular way, it means something is about to get loud. Reporters who cover the executive branch noticed the changes first. Press conferences became shorter. Questions went unanswered. Official spokespersons began using language that was carefully crafted to say absolutely nothing of substance. Behind the scenes, sources told us that senior advisors were holding meetings without documentation, that policy decisions were being made through verbal orders only, that the usual paper trail, the foundation of governmental accountability, was being deliberately avoided. We didn't know why at the time. Now we do. These memos reveal exactly what they were trying to hide. And it is far worse than anyone on the outside had imagined. Early this morning, multiple news organizations received what sources described as an unprecedented document dump, including internal communications that had not been seen outside the Oval Office in over 3 years. These are the kinds of memos that administrations only generate when they are documenting something very specific: internal conflict, policy disputes, or preparations for crisis. Analysts didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that this White House was operating in a manner fundamentally different from its public presentation. And when an administration shifts its internal posture without explanation, even by small measures, Congress pays attention. The first memo, dated 6 weeks ago, is addressed from the Chief of Staff to senior department heads. Its subject line reads simply, "Containment Protocol." The contents describe a coordinated effort to manage what the memo calls internal information asymmetry, which, translated from bureaucratic language, means keeping certain officials in the dark about key decisions. The second memo, dated 4 weeks ago, details a series of meetings between White House counsel and unnamed external legal advisors. The purpose of these meetings, according to the document, was to evaluate exposure scenarios, legal jargon for assessing vulnerability to investigation. The third memo, and this is the one that has Washington in an absolute uproar tonight, is a direct communication from a senior advisor to the president. It contains a single paragraph that we will read to you in full. And that paragraph changes everything we thought we knew about this administration's decision-making process. The response issued by congressional leadership tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Lawmakers, after closed-door emergency sessions, described the leaked memos as deeply troubling, potentially constitutionally significant, and perhaps most importantly, evidence of systematic deception of the American public. But coordinated messaging only works if the target maintains control of the narrative. The White House did not. In fact, their response today was among the most disorganized we have seen in recent memory. Here's what we know. Within 3 hours of the memos becoming public, the press secretary held an unscheduled briefing. These weren't the typical prepared remarks we've come to expect. These were hastily assembled talking points, responses that the White House only deploys when they are scrambling to contain damage. The press secretary used the phrase taken out of context 7 times in 12 minutes. They refused to confirm or deny the authenticity of the documents. They deflected questions about specific contents by attacking the motives of those who leaked them. And they made one critical error that legal experts are already analyzing tonight. They referred to the memos in the past tense, which means they knew exactly what was in them, which means they had been preparing for this moment, which means these documents are real. Tonight, we can confirm that the leaked memos reveal internal White House communications spanning a period of approximately 4 months, including correspondence that had recently been classified for what analysts believe was the explicit purpose of avoiding congressional oversight. The first category of documents details what can only be described as a shadow decision-making process. They show key policy decisions being made. They show those decisions being communicated to select officials. They show deliberate exclusion of cabinet members who would typically be involved in such matters. In other words, the memos reveal a parallel governance structure operating within the executive branch, the infrastructure that would normally provide checks and accountability. The third document in the collection is particularly damaging. It details a meeting in which senior advisors discussed how to present a policy decision to Congress in a way that would, quote, minimize investigative interest. The memo goes on to outline specific talking points designed to redirect congressional attention. It includes a section labeled Anticipated Questions, with pre-written responses that we can now confirm were used verbatim in subsequent congressional testimony. This is what has lawmakers so alarmed tonight. The administration's approach wasn't just secretive, it was coordinated. It represented the kind of systematic deception that could constitute obstruction if proven in a legal proceeding. And Congress, understanding that fully, has responded with formal requests for documents, not casually, not through normal channels, but through official subpoena authority. They didn't issue press releases first. They didn't wait for White House cooperation. They hit the document preservation requirements. They hit the testimony scheduling authorities. They moved before the White House could coordinate a response. And here's where the story becomes even more significant. Legal analysts now believe that the leaked memos were designed to document the internal deliberations of an administration that knew it might face legal scrutiny. The question becomes, why would officials create such detailed records of potentially problematic decisions? The answer, according to former federal prosecutors speaking with our team tonight, is self-preservation. Someone inside that White House was building a paper trail. Someone was ensuring that if investigations ever materialized, there would be evidence of who knew what and when they knew it. The White House wanted to maintain the appearance of unified messaging, but instead, the opposite happened. These documents reveal an administration divided against itself. They reveal internal disputes so significant, so fundamental, that senior officials felt compelled to document them in writing. You don't get that kind of documentation accidentally. But today, we have it. Intelligence community veterans speaking with media outlets under anonymity described the memo structure as a defensive archive, a way to establish individual accountability in the event of future legal proceedings. But the immediate question remains, who leaked these documents and why now? The memos prove today that this administration was both publicly confident and privately fractured. Their communications were not only contradictory, they were timed so precisely that legal experts believe they constitute evidence of coordinated deception. That timing matters because it shows intentionality. It shows that the White House was not simply making mistakes, they were executing a strategy As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of the document leak. The first batch included over 200 pages of internal communications, forcing immediate crisis meetings across multiple departments. The second release targeted specific policy areas that had been subjects of congressional inquiry in the last 6 months. A third category of documents reportedly still being analyzed contains communications used by the White House to coordinate messaging with outside political organizations. This wasn't just embarrassing. This wasn't just politically damaging. This was institutional exposure. This was operational transparency forced upon an administration that had fought to prevent exactly this outcome. And operational transparency is the one thing this White House has struggled to maintain since taking office. For every message discipline effort they have made, this leak has countered with something that undermines their credibility. The documents show internal disagreements over economic policy. They show conflicts between national security advisors over foreign policy approaches. They show tensions between the White House and cabinet departments over regulatory priorities. And perhaps most significantly, they show a pattern of decision-making that bypassed normal governmental processes. Remember, this administration thought they could maintain control of their internal narrative. They thought document security protocols would prevent exactly this kind of exposure. They thought their approach to information management would keep their internal conflicts hidden from public view. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Their internal communications are being analyzed in real time by legal experts across the country. Their decision-making processes are being scrutinized by congressional investigators. Their carefully constructed public image is being compared line by line to the reality documented in their own words. We have seen administrations face scandals before. We have seen leaks expose uncomfortable truths. But what makes this moment different is the systematic nature of what these documents reveal. This is not a single decision gone wrong. This is not an isolated incident of poor judgment. This is a documented pattern of governance that operated outside normal accountability structures. And that pattern, now exposed, cannot be unexposed. The documents exist, the words are written, and the American public now has access to information that was never meant to leave the White House. What makes this moment so dangerous and so consequential is that these leaks happened at a time when the president is already under extraordinary political pressure. Members of the opposition party want investigations. Members of the president's own party want distance. Media organizations want access and answers. Legal observers want clarity on potential violations. The president is balancing these demands while facing upcoming electoral considerations that make every decision politically significant. And when leaders in that position face sudden exposure of internal chaos, they're not operating from strength. They're operating from vulnerability. They're operating from pressure. The memos reveal that this pressure has been building for months. They show advisors warning about public perception. They show counsel raising concerns about legal exposure. They show a White House that knew it had problems and chose to manage those problems through secrecy rather than transparency. That choice has now backfired in the most public way possible. The White House statement, now distributed to media outlets nationwide, was designed to signal that the administration is not willing to allow this leak to define their narrative. Officials said plainly that the leaked documents were taken out of context and selectively released to create a misleading impression. That is diplomatic language for, we're not denying they're real, but we're going to attack how you're interpreting them. You don't usually hear that kind of defensive framing from a White House unless something serious is at stake. The statement went on to describe the leak itself as a serious breach of governmental security and called for investigation into how the documents became public. Notice what's missing from that statement. There is no denial of the contents. There is no explanation of the decision-making processes described. There is no response to specific allegations within the memos. Instead, the White House is attempting to shift focus from what the documents say to how the documents became public. That strategy has been tried before. It rarely works when the documents themselves are as damaging as these appear to be. Meanwhile, congressional leadership addressed assembled media in a carefully measured but unmistakably serious statement tonight. The speaker said, "What we have seen in these documents raises fundamental questions about how this administration conducts the people's business." They said, "We will pursue every appropriate avenue to understand what these memos reveal about executive branch operations." And they said, "The American people deserve to know whether their government is operating within constitutional boundaries." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a legislative branch that understands just how high the stakes have become. The ranking member of the relevant oversight committee added their own remarks, stating that preliminary review of the documents had already identified what they called significant areas of concern. They declined to specify those areas, but their tone made clear that what they've seen has alarmed them. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. The leaked memos weren't isolated to a single policy area. Along with the primary documents about internal decision-making, additional memos revealed communications about how to handle media inquiries on sensitive topics. Separate documents showed coordination between White House staff and external political operatives. A third category detailed discussions about managing congressional testimony in ways that, according to legal experts, could raise questions about accuracy. All of this became public within the same 24-hour period. When an administration faces exposure on multiple fronts simultaneously, it means something larger is underway. Someone with comprehensive access made a decision to release these materials. Someone who knew where the documents were, someone who knew what they contained, and someone who knew exactly how damaging they would be. The investigation into the source of the leak is already underway. But tonight, the more pressing question is what these documents tell us about how America has been governed. Legal analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that the White House was preparing for potential investigations and created these documents as part of internal legal strategy. Another is that the administration was attempting to maintain plausible deniability for decisions that they knew were controversial. A third possibility, the one concerning officials the most, is that the administration was deliberately circumventing normal oversight mechanisms in ways that could have legal consequences. But today, the White House's ability to control this narrative was taken off the table. They didn't get to frame the release. They didn't get to provide context before the documents went public. They didn't get to prepare their allies with talking points. They are now responding to a crisis they did not anticipate, with documents they cannot disown, containing words they cannot unwrite. The next 72 hours will be critical. Legal experts expect to see movement on multiple fronts. Congressional investigators will begin formal review processes. Media organizations will continue analyzing the documents for additional revelations. And the White House will be forced to either provide explanations or watch their silence be interpreted as confirmation. What we're watching now is a test of institutional accountability. The White House wants to see whether they can survive this exposure through aggressive messaging and counterattack. Congress wants to demonstrate that oversight authority remains meaningful. The Justice Department wants to maintain appropriate independence while facing inevitable political pressure. And the American public wants to understand whether the government they elected is operating with integrity. These are not abstract questions tonight. These are immediate, urgent, consequential questions that will be answered by how every institution responds in the coming days. The memos have been leaked. The contents are public. The only remaining question is, what happens next? Tonight, we've heard from sources on Capitol Hill who are now monitoring the White House response in real time. They say initial review of the documents has already generated a list of follow-up questions for administration officials. They say scheduling for testimony is being expedited given the nature of what's been revealed. And they say the administration's decision to attack the leak rather than address the contents is likely part of a broader damage control strategy intended to run out the clock on public attention. But Congress is not backing down. In fact, congressional investigators are actively pursuing additional documentation. Their response today, swift, coordinated, and substantive, sent a message to the White House that stonewalling will not be tolerated. And it sent a message to the American people that oversight mechanisms, however imperfect, are still functioning. We are also receiving reports that additional documents may be forthcoming. Sources familiar with the leak suggest that what has been released so far represents only a portion of the total material obtained. If that is accurate, tonight's revelations may be just the beginning. As the night goes on, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly the White House hoped to achieve through the decision-making processes described in these memos. But what we do know is that the leak itself has already achieved something significant. It has exposed internal dynamics that the administration fought to keep hidden. It has provided documentary evidence that contradicts public statements, and it has given congressional investigators a roadmap for further inquiry. What happens next will depend on what the White House does in the next 48 hours. If they choose transparency and cooperation, this moment will be remembered as a painful but manageable crisis. If they choose continued stonewalling and counterattack, Congress has already shown they are prepared to escalate. They have shown they have the documents. They have shown they have the authority, and they have shown they are ready to use both. The political implications are already being calculated by strategists on both sides. The legal implications are being analyzed by prosecutors and defense attorneys alike. And the historical implications, what this moment means for presidential accountability, will be debated for years to come. But tonight we are focused on the facts, the documented, written, verifiable facts that are now in the public domain. And those facts tell a story that this White House never intended anyone to hear. And tonight, for the first time in months, the White House appears to be genuinely uncertain about how to proceed. The communications office is quiet, too quiet. And when a White House goes quiet after a crisis of this magnitude, it means they are regrouping. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. It means they understand that whatever they say next will be analyzed, scrutinized, and compared against the documentary record that is now public. Because tonight, this administration learned something that previous administrations have learned before. Internal documents have a way of becoming external. Private communications have a way of becoming public. And carefully constructed narratives have a way of collapsing when contradicted by the written word. This story is far from over. The investigations are just beginning. The analysis will continue for weeks, and the political consequences will unfold over months. But tonight, one thing is clear. The memos are real. The chaos they describe is documented, and the accountability process has begun. The American public now knows what was happening behind closed doors. The question becomes, what will they demand be done about it? What will Congress uncover in follow-up investigations? What additional documents remain to be released? And how will this administration respond when the full scope of these revelations becomes clear? We don't have all the answers tonight, no one does, but we have the documents, we have the words, and we have a responsibility to report what they reveal. We will continue following this story. We will continue analyzing these memos. We will continue speaking with sources, experts, and officials who can help contextualize what we're seeing. And we will be here watching every detail as the next phase unfolds. Because this is what journalism is for. This is what accountability looks like. And this is a moment when the documented truth has become impossible to ignore. Stay with us. There is much more to come.